Hi guys, Cryphis here. Today we want to talk about dungeon grinding. Is dungeon grinding the fastest way to level in Classic World of Warcraft, and will it be the fastest way to level for you? Well, the first question is easy to answer. Yeah, dungeon grinding is the fastest way to level in Classic World of Warcraft. However, just if you are a good player and you know what you're doing. This means you are not a private server player which did the dungeon 20 times. By this I mean you played the beta and tested with the same group that you will play on launch multiple hours or even days each dungeon. You know exactly how to pull the enemies. You know exactly which one you should skip. You know exactly which groups you can pull together to RE, which pulls would be too hard, and where you can pull like 4 groups together to make it efficient and stuff like this. If you are not knowledgeable about this, will it be not efficient? In my case, I did not play the beta, but I am knowledgeable about the questing route. So I need 3 days, 18 hours with the questing on a private server. For me, dungeon grinding, even if we are in a good group, would be for 100% inefficient. It's not useful. We come to the second question. Will dungeon grinding be efficient for you? Well, if you played on the beta and you practice with a group for multiple hours and days every dungeon, then for 100% go ahead to dungeon grinding. If you did not play the beta, this depends. Are you a private server player, or are you a player which never played Classic World of Warcraft or the last time 15 years ago? At first you're a private server player. You played all the dungeons not on an efficient way like the beta player, but you know the dungeon, you know the abilities of the enemies, you know how to do the pulls, etc. On the other hand, you also are at least a bit knowledgeable about the quests. You don't need to Google up all the quests. You know also some hidden quests. For example, I like this example, for example, the envelope which is on a skeleton down the bridge over there, and your knowledge in both ways. For you, the best method would be to do all the dungeons once with all the quests, and the other time do you spend by doing dungeons. However, this would be the optimal way, but you probably play on a PvP server, and even if not, we are not knowledgeable about how Blizzard will do it with the layering. Perhaps you find yourself in a situation in which are too many players killing too less enemies and you need to wait, you have downtime, you can't do it efficient. In this case, would it of course be efficient for you to do dungeon grinding? Also, could it be that you come in a PvP zone and there's a huge battlefield? If you played already on a private server, you are knowledgeable about Stangled Whale. We are there between level 30 and 45. This is a huge battlefield. You will die here so often if you play with the mass together. In this case, of course, do dungeon grinding. In conclusion, if you are an experienced player on private server, dungeon grinding is a bit worse than questing. However, if you can't do the quest efficient because you quest together with the mass, or you are in a huge PvP zone, then is dungeon grinding better, since the difference between dungeon grinding and questing is not that huge, it's just a tiny bit. Therefore, do you need to choose what you want to do depending on the situation. But overall, is dungeon grinding a bit slower than doing quests. Second case, you're a new player, you never played Classic World of Warcraft on a private server, and Blizzard Classic is 15 years ago, or you never played Classic at all. The same way, the dungeon quests are very awesome. They give you a huge amount of experience. Elite quests at all are just awesome in Classic World of Warcraft. If you don't know which quests you need for a dungeon, just Google it up. For example, we are in Stratholme here, and just type in Google Stratholme live or undead, depending on which zone you are, quest run. Then will you get a huge amount of pages which all includes good guides, which tells you exactly where you can take the quest and in which order you have to do them, and sometimes also some tips how to do them if they are a little bit tricky. Therefore, the optimal way would be to do all the dungeons once with all quests. However, the big difference is the experienced player knows the dungeon. He knows how to pull, and especially enemy abilities and trigger points. For example, we are here in Stratholme. If you pass this stairs somewhere over here, will you spawn a boss? And if you are in a fight with another pack and your healer is on low mana, will this end in a wipe? You're not bad, you didn't know that. You died because being unknowledge. And in this dungeons, I can't open the door unfortunately, but in this dungeons are multiple trigger points, I think around 4 or 5. So 4 or 5 times in which you probably for 90% will wipe the whole group, because you don't notice. If you have 4 experienced players in the group, would it be not that bad, since they just tell you, hey, stay back, we are going in the front, just come to us then. But if you are in a group which no one has the knowledge about the dungeon, will it just be a wipe fest? You probably also need to go back to the city or to the next village to repair because you died it often, which is very inefficient obviously. But on the other hand, will you find yourself in similar situation like an experienced player? You could be in the circ and have issues to find mobs because they die so fast. There are too many players for too less mob, and you will also find yourself in huge PvP zones like Strangledon Whale. However, I would still recommend you to rather stay in the leveling zone than going in dungeons, since you need to do a dungeon multiple times to understand the trigger points. And you don't remind yourself all the time, especially if you are awake 16 hours a day. You can't remind yourself every time. And the issue is, you are 5 players in the group. Means the chance that some of you forgot the trigger point is pretty high, especially if you are in a new group. It also still happens to me, a guy which did the dungeons multiple times. It also happens to other players which did the dungeon multiple times. So therefore you come now in a dungeon with no experience, and even if you do the dungeon 4 or 5 times, will you still fuck up those trigger points, because it's just hard to remember everything about the dungeon. At first to figure it out and then to remember it. Dungeon grinding won't be efficient for you. It just won't be. As long you don't find yourself in a situation in which you can't do anything else. For example, you're in a PvP zone and you will just get corpse camped. There's a horde player or alliance player depending on your faction, and he's just camping you. He doesn't like you for what reason ever and just kills you all the time, in which you obviously get 0 experience. In this situation, would it be better to do dungeon groups? In conclusion, do all the dungeons once. Try to find a group which has already knowledge about the dungeon so that you can just follow them. Otherwise, stay outside and do the quests. You will probably still find yourself in a situation in which you do not have any quest because you have a bad order or you skip too much and you just need to grind. Grinding will still be more efficient than doing dungeon grinding group because you're just too unknowledge. If you are a healer and you can manage it in a group which is filled up with private server player or even beta player, then never mind what I said, and then just go ahead with them and do some dungeon grinds. But otherwise, do the dungeons once and then stay outside and do just your quest and grind. As long you are not totally outplayed by corpse camping or the zone is totally filled and you can't do anything, or let's say every 2 minutes you are able to kill 1 mob, then you can also go ahead and try it out with a dungeon group. If you want to do it, try, as already mentioned, to find experienced player or at least one which can explain the world group how to play the game. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If yes, don't forget to throw me a follow. Also like the video and write in the comments which topic the next video should have, or how can I still help you to increase your leveling tips. What knowledge do you need? Have a good day. See you guys. 6 days left till launch.